The night explodes without warning. You are half asleep in the wet heat of Guadalcanal when the jungle erupts, rifle fire cracking in bursts, machine guns hammering in long, ripping sheets of sound. Tracers slice through the darkness like red-hot needles. Somewhere to your front, men are screaming. Somewhere closer, someone is praying. For months, the rule has been absolute. Japan owns the night. They move after sunset, strike without warning, and vanish before dawn. Their destroyers run the slot in darkness. Their infantry infiltrates silently, slipping through jungle and wire. Again and again, night has been their ally, their shield, their weapon. Every commander in the Pacific knows it. Every Marine on Guadalcanal feels it in his bones. You do not outfight the Japanese at night. You survive them, if you can. And above all, you do not challenge them for control of an island they can reinforce after dark while you wait helplessly for daylight. That is the rule. It exists because Japan's navy is faster, its night training superior, its pilots blooded by years of war. It exists because the United States arrived in the Pacific unprepared, untested, and on this island desperately exposed. Guadalcanal is not supposed to be held. It is supposed to be raided, abandoned, or bled white. But in 1942, one unfinished airstrip carved out of the jungle breaks that rule. Quietly at first, then violently, irreversibly. And at its center, manning a pair of heavy machine guns in choking darkness, is a 25-year-old Marine from New Jersey who refuses to give ground. Because once Henderson Field stays alive through the night, Japan's war in the Pacific begins to unravel. You are Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone. You grew up in Raritan, New Jersey, the son of Italian immigrants. You enlisted in the Army before the war, served in the Philippines, then joined the Marines because you wanted something harder. Something that demanded more. By 1942, you are compact, broad-shouldered, and unflinching. Your men trust you because you stay standing when others duck, because you know your weapons down to the last belt and pin, because when things go wrong, and they always do, you move toward the sound of gunfire, not away from it. Now you are on Guadalcanal. The island is misery made solid, 90-degree heat, relentless rain, malaria-carrying mosquitoes, rations cut to 2 meals a day, sometimes 1. Ammunition counted like gold coins. And yet, this island matters more than any place you have ever stood, because carved out of its jungle is Henderson Field, a rough, dirt airstrip captured by U.S. Marines in August 1942 before the Japanese even realize it exists. An airfield so crude that planes kick up clouds of dust on takeoff, so vulnerable that artillery shells can reach it from the hills. But it is the hinge of the entire campaign. From Henderson Field, American aircraft can strike Japanese ships by day. They can contest the skies. They can deny safe passage through the waters north of the island, waters the Japanese call the Tokyo Express. As long as Henderson Field operates, Japan cannot freely reinforce Guadalcanal. As long as it survives, the rule begins to crack. The Japanese know this, and they are coming. Their plan is simple and ruthless. Break the American perimeter at night. Overrun the airfield before dawn. Destroy the planes on the ground. Reclaim the island. They throw elite infantry into the jungle, veterans of China, men trained to close with bayonets and grenades, men who believe absolutely that Americans cannot fight in darkness. On the night of October 24, 1942, they launch the attack, and you are positioned directly in its path. The jungle in front of you starts to move. At first, it is subtle, branches shifting where no wind blows, shadows detaching themselves from trees. Then the firing begins, rifles snapping, machine guns stuttering, flares bursting overhead and washing the ground in harsh white light. You man a pair of .30 caliber machine guns guarding a narrow approach to Henderson Field. You can hear them now. Japanese infantry advancing in waves, shouting commands, blowing whistles. Mortar rounds thump into the earth, sending dirt and shrapnel into the air. You fire. The machine gun bucks against your shoulder, its barrel glowing faintly as belts feed through your hands. Tracers tear into the darkness. Men fall. Others keep coming. Your left gun jams. You clear it under fire. Your right gun keeps firing. The noise is deafening. The smell of cordite fills your lungs. Sweat runs into your eyes, stinging, blinding. Then that gun jams too. For a moment, the night goes terribly quiet. This is where the rule should reassert itself. This is where the Japanese should break through. Instead, you run. You sprint 50 yards through shellfire to find ammunition. Bullets snap past your head. A mortar detonates close enough to knock you off your feet. You get up, you keep moving. You haul boxes of belts back through the darkness. You feed the guns again. You fire until the barrels burn your hands through the gloves. Wave after wave crashes into your position. The Japanese close to within 30 yards, then 20, then 10. Grenades explode. Shrapnel cuts through flesh. Marines fall beside you. You keep firing. By dawn, over 200 Japanese soldiers lie dead in front of your guns. Henderson Field still stands, and the sun is coming up. Dawn does not bring relief. It brings clarity. As the light spreads across the shattered jungle, you see what the night has done. Bodies tangled in wire. Rifles abandoned where men fell mid-charge. Shallow craters punched into the earth so close to your position you can still smell the explosives. Your hands are blistered. Your ears ring. Your throat feels scraped raw from shouting orders over gunfire. But Henderson Field is still operational, and that single fact changes everything. Because as the sun climbs higher, you hear a sound the Japanese did not plan for: aircraft engines. At 6:15 hours, the first American fighters lift off from the strip. Wildcats heavy and slow, clawing for altitude. Bombers follow, SBD Dauntless dive bombers with chipped paint and patched wings. They turn north. Out beyond the coast, Japanese ships are still in daylight waters. That is not supposed to happen. For weeks, the Japanese Navy has ruled these seas by night, delivering troops and supplies under cover of darkness, then retreating before sunrise. But now Henderson Field's aircraft are airborne early enough to catch them. You watch as smoke columns rise on the horizon. Reports come in fast: a cruiser hit, a transport damaged, destroyers forced to scatter. The Tokyo Express stumbles in daylight. The Japanese attack did not fail because of one machine gun position. It failed because it did not destroy the airfield behind you. And the enemy knows it. They come again. Night after night, the attacks repeat. Different units, different angles, same objective: break through, kill the airfield, end the nightmare. You rotate positions, barely sleeping. Sometimes 20 minutes at a time, sometimes not at all. Food is scarce. Ammunition is scarcer. Every belt you load might be the last one you get. On October 25th, another assault crashes into the perimeter. Artillery walks forward in timed barrages. Infantry follows so close behind the shells that fragments cut them down alongside Marines. You fire until your shoulders go numb. You hear Japanese officers screaming orders. You hear bugles. You hear men charging into gunfire they cannot stop. At one point, the line bends, then bends again. Failure feels close enough to touch. If they break through here, just here, they will be inside the airfield perimeter before dawn. You drag a gun into a new position under fire. You angle it down a shallow slope. You wait until you can see faces. Then you fire. By morning, the assault collapses again. The pattern repeats across the island. And now the war expands beyond the jungle, because Henderson Field does not just fight infantry. It hunts ships. Every day, American aircraft strike Japanese convoys. Bombs rip into decks. Torpedoes slice into hulls. Ships that survive limp away burning. Japanese commanders begin to realize the cost. For every night run, they lose destroyers they cannot replace. For every reinforcement, they lose the daylight protection they once relied on. And then, the sea itself erupts. In November 1942, the Japanese make a final, desperate gamble. They commit battleships. Their plan is brutal and direct. Steam into range at night, bombard Henderson Field into rubble, then land overwhelming forces to finish the job. On the night of November 12th, naval gunfire lights the horizon. You feel the concussion miles inland as shells weighing nearly a ton crash into American ships. The sea battle is chaotic, confused, fought at knife-fight distances in darkness and rain. Ships pass so close crews can hear voices across the water. The Japanese score hits. American ships burn. Destroyers vanish in explosions so violent they momentarily turn night into day. But the Japanese do not get what they came for. Henderson Field survives, again. The next morning, American aircraft rise from the strip and find the damaged Japanese force retreating in daylight. They tear into it. Battleships that should have been untouchable are struck repeatedly. Cruisers capsize. Destroyers sink under strafing runs and bombs. The cost is catastrophic. This is the moment, quiet, incremental, undeniable, when the rule finally dies. Japan no longer owns the night. And Henderson Field is the reason. If you find this kind of forgotten history as fascinating as we do, we'd be honored if you'd hit that subscribe button. We believe these stories of courage, sacrifice, and battlefield genius deserve to be told. And by subscribing, you help us ensure they aren't forgotten. Back on Guadalcanal, you feel the change before you hear it explained. The attacks slow. Then they stop. Japanese artillery fires less frequently. Their infantry probes lack coordination. Prisoners whisper about hunger, about units arriving with half their strength gone to air attacks at sea. You are exhausted beyond anything you have known, but you are still standing, and Henderson Field is still flying. The jungle goes quiet in a way that unsettles you more than gunfire ever did. Not the normal quiet, never that, but an absence. No probing shots after dusk. No sudden whistles. No grenades rolling out of the dark. Just insects wind through palm fronds and the distant rumble of aircraft engines that never seem to stop anymore. Because Henderson Field is no longer fighting to survive. It is fighting to dominate. What you could not see from your machine gun position now becomes clear across the Pacific map. The Japanese are not just losing Guadalcanal. They are losing control of time and space. Every sunrise now belongs to the Americans. Japanese naval planners had built their entire Guadalcanal strategy around one assumption: that daylight was lethal and night was safe. They could move troops after dark, supply isolated units, withdraw before dawn, and accept losses as long as the rhythm held. Henderson Field breaks that rhythm. It forces Japanese ships to choose between two impossible options: arrive at night and unload blindly under harassment without heavy equipment, or stay into daylight and be found, bombed, torpedoed, hunted. What they did not know, what they could not know at first, was that this single airfield would bleed their navy dry faster than any surface engagement. Destroyers meant to escort carriers are now hauling rice and ammunition. Battleships designed to fight fleets are risking everything just to silence an airstrip that refuses to die. And the losses accumulate. By late November 1942, Japan has lost dozens of ships in the waters around Guadalcanal. Not in one climactic battle, but in relentless, grinding attrition. Losses they cannot replace, crews they cannot retrain. Back on the island, the consequences are immediate. Japanese ground units begin to starve. Supplies that make it ashore are too little, too late. Ammunition is rationed. Medical care collapses. Malaria and dysentery spread unchecked. Men weaken before they ever reach the American lines. Interrogations reveal the truth. Japanese soldiers no longer talk about victory. They talk about endurance, about surviving long enough to be evacuated. And that, more than anything, tells you the war has turned. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, Japan is not advancing. It is reacting, scrambling, paying for every mile with blood and steel. American commanders see it clearly. Guadalcanal was never just an island. It was a test. A test of whether Japan's war machine could be stopped, of whether the United States could hold ground under sustained pressure, of whether air power, if protected and supplied, could strangle an enemy far stronger on paper. Henderson Field passes that test, and in doing so, it becomes a template. Future campaigns will follow the same logic. Seize an airfield, hold it at all costs, use it to deny the enemy movement, then advance again. Island by island, runway by runway. The Japanese High Command reaches the same conclusion too late. In December 1942, orders are issued for evacuation. Not victory, not reinforcement, evacuation. The island that was supposed to be crushed becomes a wound Japan can no longer afford to bleed from. By February 1943, the last Japanese troops slip away under cover of darkness. The Tokyo Express runs one final time, not to attack but to escape. Guadalcanal is secured. And the airfield that almost fell in the night now hums continuously with aircraft lifting toward the next objective. For you, the realization is quieter. There is no ceremony, no announcement, just fewer shots fired at night, more planes overhead during the day, and the slow, unmistakable sense that the enemy across the wire no longer believes he can win. When the fighting finally loosens its grip on Guadalcanal, you do not feel triumph. You feel hollow. The jungle looks the same, thick, green, indifferent, but everything else has changed. Men who stood beside you weeks ago are gone. Some were evacuated. Many were buried where they fell, their names scratched onto temporary markers that will never fully capture what they endured here. You are still only 25 years old, and yet the war has aged you far beyond that. Word spread slowly, almost awkwardly, about what you did during those nights around Henderson Field, about the machine guns, about the runs through shell fire, about holding a line that could not be allowed to break. Eventually, it becomes official. You are awarded the Medal of Honor, not for a single moment, but for days of sustained combat where failure would have meant the loss of the airfield, the island, and possibly the campaign itself. When you return home, crowds cheer. Newspapers print your photograph. Politicians shake your hand. But you do not stay. You re-enlist. Because Henderson Field did not end the war. It only changed its direction. In February 1945, on the black sands of Iwo Jima, you land again, this time as a gunnery sergeant leading men ashore under fire. The enemy is entrenched. The beach offers no cover. Machine gun fire cuts down Marines as they advance yard by yard. You move forward anyway. You always do. On February 19, 1945, John Basilone is killed by enemy fire. He is 28 years old. He leaves behind a record that does not speak in abstractions or strategy papers, but in lived experience, in the truth that wars turn not only on fleets and factories, but on exhausted men refusing to yield ground in the dark. Henderson Field still exists today. It is no longer a dirt strip hacked from jungle. It is part of an international airport on Guadalcanal, serving civilians who walk across ground once soaked with blood and fuel and rain. Most will never know how close it came to falling. Most will never know that if that airfield had been lost, if those nights had gone differently, the Pacific War might have stretched on longer, cost more lives, and demanded a far higher price before it ended. That is why this story matters now. Because history does not turn only on grand declarations or famous battles. Sometimes it turns on a single strip of earth, defended through the night by men who understand exactly what will happen if they fail. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. Every click tells the algorithm this piece of history is worth remembering. We're dedicated to rescuing these forgotten stories from the archives. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment with your city or state and tell us if someone in your family served. Thank you for ensuring that John Basilone and the thousands of Marines who fought to hold Henderson Field do not disappear into silence. They deserve to be remembered.